I'm 86 years old, and I wish I had loved my children differently. That thought sits with me every morning when I wake, heavy and quiet, like the light through the window that doesn't quite warm the room. I don't mean that I didn't care. I did. I cared too much in some ways, and in others, not enough. I didn't realize then that caring could take the wrong shape, that being responsible could be the same as being absent. I suppose it started early, though I didn't see it at the time. I was young, in my 20s, just married, full of ambition and a restless sort of pride. My husband worked long hours, and I felt like I had to hold everything together. Keep the house, the schedule, the meals, the laundry, all of it, perfectly. I thought that if I could be efficient enough, good enough, my children would be fine. They would feel love through structure, through order, through routine. I didn't know love could be softer than that. I didn't know it needed presence more than perfection. The first child arrived when I was 24, a girl, small and bright-eyed, and I loved her immediately, fiercely, almost painfully. But the love was practical. I remember making her first baby clothes, arranging her nursery in colors I thought she would like, checking off lists, making sure everything was clean and safe. And I remember leaving her in the crib sometimes while I tidied, or wrote letters, or read the newspaper. It seemed necessary, and it was. But she cried, and I didn't always go to her immediately. I told myself she needed to learn patience, that she would be safer if I stayed calm. I see now that what she needed most was me. Not calmness, not order, me. By the time the second came, a boy, 2 years later, I had habits in place. I knew the rhythms of meals and naps, baths and bedtime stories. I knew how to get through the day without panicking. But I also knew how to avoid the awkwardness of being tired or frustrated or distracted. And I did. I learned to smile while my patience thinned, to answer questions with half an ear while my mind was elsewhere. It felt like survival, like keeping the family running, like doing what was best. I didn't notice the small cost, the nights I spent grading papers for the small tutoring I did instead of sitting in the dark beside them while they fell asleep. The afternoons I spent ironing rather than walking with them in the park. The dinners where I nodded at their stories, but my mind was on bills and planning and the next day. These weren't dramatic betrayals. They were quiet, accumulating, like dust in a corner, and I didn't see it until much later. School days passed, and I attended games and recitals when I could, but always with one eye on responsibility. The piano lessons I signed them up for, the extra classes I pushed them toward. I believed these were gifts. Yet I remember the look on my daughter's face when I rushed her off to ballet, glancing at my watch, urging her along. And I remember my son, older now, lingering at the door, wishing I would linger with him instead of checking the oven. The guilt was there, dim and flickering, but I didn't tend it. I thought love could be measured in doing, not being. There were moments that should have been simple: bedtime talks, walks to the corner store, quiet conversations after school. I filled those moments with instruction, reminders, lists, chores. I thought I was preparing them for life. I was preparing them for a life where they would never need me in the way I had needed my mother. I didn't know that preparing and loving were not the same thing. I was proud of the household we ran, of the meals, the cleanliness, the order, the appearances. I was proud when they excelled, when they received awards, when the teachers complimented their behavior. And yet, looking back, I see now that my pride sometimes stood in the way of tenderness. I see that love requires a surrender I didn't understand, a willingness to let them mess up, to sit with them in frustration, to let the hours stretch with conversation instead of duty. I remember my daughter's 16th birthday. She wanted me to come to her recital, but I was scheduled to host a friend for tea. I thought I could do both, thought it would be fine. I tried, but I was late, flustered, half listening. She smiled at me when she saw me, but I saw the disappointment flicker and vanish behind her practiced politeness. My son watched me rush past him to answer the phone during his spelling bee celebration. He got second place. I was proud, but I missed his pride, the way it shone in his own eyes, and I missed the chance to be fully there. The years rolled on. Teenagers became young adults. I cheered from a distance, often out of necessity, sometimes out of habit. My love was there, but it had become a series of gestures, appointments kept, advice given, help provided. My presence, the simple, quiet, irreplaceable presence of a mother in moments that mattered to them, was not always offered. And I can't go back to give it now. I see it in the way they look at me today. My daughter, gentle, polite, loving, but cautious with me. My son, kind, patient, but reserved. They carry the echoes of a mother who was there and a mother who was somewhere else. I can feel it in the pauses, in the way they phrase things, in the small silences between us. The gaps were not sudden, not explosive. They crept in over decades, quiet as a shadow. And now, at 86, it is obvious. The clarity comes too late. My husband is gone. My siblings are gone. Friends have dwindled to phone calls I often forget to return. My children live far away, and I cannot travel easily. And when they visit, or call, or send messages, I realize how much I missed, how much I will never recover. Birthdays, recitals, arguments, consolations, small shared jokes, all lost in the way life quietly slipped past me. I remember the day my daughter called from her new home across the country. She had a minor injury, nothing serious, but she sounded hesitant. She didn't ask me first for comfort. She didn't expect me to show up. And it struck me then how many times I had let her learn independence not by choice, but by absence. I had taught her strength, yes, but also distance. And I realized painfully that love, the kind that matters most, had to be given, not managed. I think of my son sometimes, how he never liked to complain, how he learned to wait, to contain disappointment quietly. He does not blame me, but I see the restraint in him that might have been unnecessary. I see it in the way he smiles too fast, talks too carefully, as if measuring his words to avoid disappointment. I wonder if I had lingered more, if I had listened more, if I had simply sat with him in silence sometimes, would he be lighter now? Regret is not one sharp moment. It is a slow erosion. I don't feel it in dramatic waves, but in the quiet hours before sleep, when the house is still, when my body aches and my mind wanders through decades of nearly invisible decisions. Did I love enough in the ways that mattered? I loved, yes, but love can be the wrong shape. Love can be practical, careful, controlled, and still insufficient. It is not bitterness I feel, not really. There is gratitude mixed in. I am grateful for the laughter that did happen, for the hugs, for the moments when I did sit with them and listen fully, even if they were too few. But grief lives beside gratitude now. It sits with me at the table, a silent companion, and the silence of what cannot be fixed is heavier than any of it. I wish I could tell them, in the way I now understand, how love should have looked, how it should have lingered, how it should have been messy, patient, forgiving of mistakes, present without agenda. I would tell them to hold on to those moments, to take them seriously, to sit through boredom, frustration, anger, and fatigue, because the hours are fleeting and the heart remembers presence more than perfection. I want to speak to the person listening now. If you are willing, hear this. The time you think you have to correct, to adjust, to mend, is shorter than it seems. The children, the ones you hold, will grow up, and the space for quiet, undirected, patient presence will shrink faster than you can measure. And once it is gone. Not with drama, not with fire, but slowly, invisibly, like dust settling in corners. I'm 86, and I live with that dust now. I do not dwell in it constantly, but it is part of me. It teaches me, in its quiet way, about the shape of absence, about the weight of decades measured in gestures I thought were enough, about the ache of things I cannot undo. And I carry it because it is all I have left to carry. I think this is enough for now. The rest of the story is slower, quieter, and harder to face, but it is there, and I am ready to continue if you wish. I remember the morning my son got married. I was there, of course, in the front row, smiling, giving the words I was told to give. But I also remember feeling a strange heaviness in my chest, a realization that so many mornings, so many small, ordinary mornings, had passed without me truly being there. I had hugged him, yes, but not always at the right time. I had kissed his forehead, whispered, "I love you," but often while distracted, thinking of the laundry or the bills or what needed fixing in the kitchen. And now, decades later, those moments seem like ghosts, faint echoes of something I had assumed would always be enough. My daughter was the same. Her wedding, her first house, the day her first child was born, I attended all of it. I helped when I could. I smiled and cheered. But the intimacy of ordinary days, the hand held during tears, the soft laughter shared over a silly story, the quiet reassurance that I was there, those moments had been stolen by efficiency, by pride, by fear of imperfection. I see it now, and the realization is not bitter, it's just empty. I think often about the nights I didn't stay up to hear about school, the mornings I left too early for work to walk them to the bus. There were birthdays I remembered but celebrated in a hurry, not in presence. And Christmases, oh Christmases, with all their chaos, I was always managing, arranging, organizing, perfecting. And in all that striving, I lost sight of the way they saw me, the way they would remember me. I can see it now, their memories of me shaped not by care and warmth, but by duty and order. I wasn't cruel, not in the sense anyone would notice. I was absent in small ways, and those small absences accumulated like invisible weight pressing down on a fragile structure. The turning point came softly. My husband died when I was 75. He had been my partner in all of it, my co-manager of the household, my fellow navigator of our children's lives. And suddenly, the balance shifted. I was alone, and the absence revealed itself in a clarity I hadn't known before. My children called more, visited when they could, but I could see the distance that had grown over decades. It wasn't intentional. It wasn't malicious. It was simply the residue of time, of choices made without the awareness of consequence. I realized with a pang that settled deep in my chest that my love had always been present in the abstract, but too often absent in the immediate human ways that matter most. I remember one quiet evening sitting in my living room, looking at photographs of my children when they were small. I saw their eyes, bright and curious, reaching for me, expecting me to be there in ways I wasn't. And I wept, softly, not for them, but for the opportunities I had allowed to pass, for the ordinary, invisible ways I could have been more present. I could have held them longer, listened more intently, laughed more freely, lingered when I was tired. I could have let them see my flaws, my fear, my frustration, and still love them openly, without management, without calculation. I think about my daughter calling last month. She was worried about her mother, worried about me, and I could hear her hesitation, the carefulness in her voice. I had been the one to teach caution, to encourage self-reliance, and I understood, painfully, that the distance she maintained was partly of my own making. I had modeled love as conditional, as something to be earned through compliance and achievement, through smiles and politeness. That was never my intention, but intentions do not undo absence. I think about the small moments that cannot be recovered, the missed bedtime stories, the forgotten questions about school, the unheeded worries about friends. I remember the afternoons I could have taken walks with them, played board games, lingered over simple conversations, and instead I was elsewhere, busy, distracted, thinking it was enough to be present in form, if not in substance. The small costs seemed insignificant at the time, and now they have compounded into a weight that settles over me like a quiet shadow. There were milestones I attended, of course, graduations, performances, anniversaries, weddings, and I can still remember the smiles I gave, the applause I clapped. But those were always punctuated by a part of me elsewhere, the lists, the planning, the doing. And now I see that the moments that matter most are not the grand gestures, but the ordinary, messy, present ones. The whispered words, the shared meals without hurry, the quiet acknowledgement of feelings as they arise. Those were lost, and they cannot be retrieved. I think about love now at 86. I see how it took shape in my life, and I see where it failed. Not in absence of care, not in lack of devotion, but in a misunderstanding of what presence means. I gave guidance, protection, structure, and expectation. I thought that was love. But love is quieter than that. Love is patient. Love lingers even when inconvenient, even when tiring. Love is there in the small, unremarkable ways, in the attentiveness that cannot be scheduled, in the moments we take for granted until they are gone. I cannot change the past. My children are grown, their lives full, and I am at the edge of mine. I can offer love now, yes, and gratitude, and quiet affection, but I cannot fill the spaces I left empty when it mattered most. And I feel that emptiness every day, as a companion more constant than my own thoughts. It is not punishing, it is simply real. It is the truth I have to live with, the consequence of decades lived without understanding the simplest, most important shape of love. I speak to you, whoever is listening, with the hope that it may carry in a quiet way. If you have children, or nieces, nephews, or someone small in your life, linger, sit with them, listen, be messy, be human, be fully present. You may think you have all the time in the world to teach, to fix, to show love in the ways you imagine matter. But the truth, the quiet, unforgiving truth, is that time moves faster than you expect. The ordinary moments are the ones that will become their memories, and they will carry them with them in ways you cannot measure until decades later, when the space for presence has shrunk and you see what was lost. I am 86. My children love me, in their way, and I love them as fully as I can now. But there is a quiet sorrow in knowing that love could have been more than it was, that it could have been present in ways I cannot now give, that some things once missed are gone forever. And so I sit with it. I think of them and I remember, and I try to hold myself gently to the truth of what I did and what I failed to do. The rest of my days are few, and I will spend them remembering, regretting in the soft, honest way that only years can teach. And in that remembering, there is also a kind of attention, a kind of watchfulness, a quiet hope that my presence now, flawed as it is, may still be enough to reach them in some small way. I suppose that is all I can say. That is all I have left to say. I am 86. I wish I had loved my children differently. And now I sit with that truth, quietly, for the remainder of my days.